All right, everybody. It's the moment you all have been waiting for, especially if you're into the boxing breakdowns that I've been doing on my channel. If you know, I will put a link in the description of this video to the tape study or the tale of the tape study between the fight we're going to be breaking down in Terence "Bud" Crawford going up against Errol "The Truth" Spence Jr. I did a full-on tape study breaking down the different aspects of the boxing game that each man, including Terence and Errol, are proficient in. Their clinch work, their 50-50 position work, their body shots, their range striking, everything like that. I've already broken that down. It's about a 20-minute breakdown, and I will attach a link to that video in the description. But today, we're going to be doing the prediction and analysis for Errol Spence Jr. versus Terence "Bud" Crawford. Sorry, I can't speak. In one of the most highly anticipated boxing fights and one of the most anticipated boxing matches in recent memory, a fight that people have wanted to see for years and years. And I'm really excited to break it down for you. I've watched tape on both these guys, obviously did that whole breakdown, and it's not going to be as in-depth and analytical as the breakdown I did before, but we're going to get into it. So looking at this fight, obviously, right, you've got two Southpaws. They're both going to be fighting with their lead right hand and their left hand being the power side. So Southpaw versus Southpaw. When you look at Southpaw versus Orthodox, or the battle of the opposite stance fighters, if you can also call Orthodox equal stance, but you know, it's the same principle. You know, the same principles entail and lie beneath the surface, if you know what I mean. So when you're looking at Southpaw versus Southpaw, you're mainly going to be relying on the same weapon. It's going to be the lead hand jab or hook, and then the rear hand cross. When you're going Southpaw versus Orthodox, it's more going to be the fight of the outside foot positioning. It's going to be the foot positioning battle, and I talk about this in every boxing breakdown that I've done so far on the channel. The Lomachenko and Haney breakdown, the Garcia and Gervonta Davis breakdown, and the same principles are going to lie here, especially since it's not like a mixed martial arts fight where you're going to have more weapons to worry about, and you're going to have the grappling, the knees in the clinch, the body work, the calf kicks, the low kicks, the head kicks. Like, you don't have to worry about as many weapons, but that also means that the fighters inside the ring are going to be a lot more proficient at setting up their attacks and finding ways to get through your defense to land the shots that they need to. But since this is Southpaw versus Southpaw, it's mainly going to be the jab of Errol Spence versus the jab of Terence "Bud" Crawford, and then the back power hand straight, uppercut, and overhand of Bud and the Truth. But if it was Orthodox versus Southpaw, you're going to be looking at getting that outside foot positioning. So the Southpaw would want to get their lead right foot on the outside of the lead left foot of their opponent, who is Orthodox and right hand reliant or dependent. And then vice versa, it would be the Orthodox fighter getting the lead left foot on the outside positioning of the lead right foot of the Southpaw to be able to find the trajectory for their power backhand, whether it be straight, overhand, or uppercut, and get out of the range and trajectory of the opponent's power backhand by being able to slip off the center line, but also cutting that angle to be able to step to the outside and potentially pivot around, slip, roll, or pivot and get off. So this is what we're going to be looking at. We're looking at Southpaw versus Southpaw. Now, you're going to say who has more power. When you look at this fight, I think it's without a doubt going to be Terence "Bud" Crawford who has the more power in his punches, but at the same time, Errol Spence Jr. isn't only about the volume. Errol Spence Jr. isn't only about the combinations. He has power in his punches as well. You look at the media workouts, and that's something I did take a look at before I got into this breakdown, and that's why I waited until the end of this week going into fight week to break this fight down fully for you guys. I think when I looked at the media workouts, it looked like Spence Jr.'s game plan and everything he was doing in training with his lead trainer in Derek James was tailored specifically to the style of Terence "Bud" Crawford. Crawford has a lot of power, but at certain positions, he's not as technical, and he kind of just wings his punches out there. He can touch, and rip with power shots, you know, setting them up, kind of pitter-pattering you into setting up his power to knock you out, but for the most part, it's kind of just finding weird angles and being awkward, and I feel like Terence Crawford is a little bit more awkward than Errol Spence Jr., and if you go and you look at the media workouts, when he was hitting pads with his head trainer and Derek James, when James was getting backed up into the corner, he was switching between Southpaw and Orthodox. He was switching his stances to be able to try to confuse Errol Spence and be able to find an exit off the ropes to be able to pivot back to the center of the ring. And, you know, Errol Spence was really calculated. He was very calm. He was touching with that jab, touch. He was cutting off even when Derek James was switching his stances from southpaw to orthodox. When he was using those switch stance combinations up against the ropes, he was backing up, he was measuring with the jab, and he was cutting off the exits of Terence Bud Crawford. That goes to show me that they have really broken down the game of Terence Crawford. Him being able to land heavy power backing up, which means that using that jab for Spence is going to be paramount in winning this fight, because he's going to have to use the jab not only to set up his power shots, not only to set up the pitter-pat shots to rip to the body of Bud, but to be able to control the range so that if he feels like he has Bud hurt, he's not just going to rush in and then he'll be open for the back foot counters of the power puncher in Terence Bud Crawford. Bud is so dangerous off of his back foot. He can land vicious left uppercuts to the body or left hooks to the body. He can land vicious straight lefts backing up. He's very good at pivoting off with that lead foot to get the outside foot positioning, but that's not going to be as available in this fight against Errol Spence because they are both out of the southpaw position. So that outside foot battle isn't going to be a thing. And if you really want to step to the outside or step off on an angle, it's going to have to be more of backing up, creating distance and range between you and your opponent, and then finding a way to step off to the left or step off to the right. It would more than likely be a step off to the right since they're both southpaw, so they could step off and then pivot and then go back and try to force the opponent to reset. And then if they were to step off to the opposite side, which would be their rear left side, it's going to be more of creating that angle step to be able to find that distance and range, and then stepping off to the rear side angle to land the overhand punches or the straight shots. I think this is a very, very competitive fight. I think it's a very close fight, but I do favor the more technical and cerebral fighter to be Errol Spence Jr. I think that he is a lot more technical in the way he sets up his punches, and I'm going to go back to the media workouts again, but everything he was throwing was tight, crisp, clean. There was never a part or a portion in the workouts where he overextended, where he overcommitted to where he was throwing himself off balance or being open for a big counter. Everything he did was tight. He had a very tight game plan. It was jab, cross, hook, uppercut, bang, bang, rip to the body. And when he was cutting him off, he wasn't overstepping either. He wasn't like overcommitting with his side steps. He wasn't overcommitting with his lateral movement to where he could maybe slip up, maybe cross his feet, or fall out of position to where the awkward, more powerful puncher in Terence Bud Crawford would be able to find the openings. The best path to victory for Errol Spence Jr. is to stick that jab in the face of Bud. Who has the better jab? It's no question that it's Errol Spence Jr. If he can stick that jab in the face of Bud Crawford, it's going to make it harder for Bud to find the pathways to land his power shots. But not only that, it's going to make Terence Crawford have to overcommit and kind of get wild and get in the face of Errol Spence Jr., which on one hand is the way that he's going to win this fight. It's by catching Errol Spence with a counter backing up. It's by getting him to engage in that 50-50 position battle and maybe landing a big uppercut, maybe landing a big body shot, maybe stepping off on an angle and landing a big left hook or a big left straight, a big right hook as he tries to pivot off, check hooking Errol Spence. But Errol Spence is so dialed in. He's so, game plan heavy focused around the style of Terence Crawford, and you could really see that in the open workouts. I feel like Spence is going to be sharper. I feel like Spence isn't going to be overcommitting on his shots. He's not going to be overstepping. He's going to be very dialed in. He's going to take short steps. He's going to be cutting off the ring from Terence Crawford, but you always have to worry about the equalizer, and that's how Terence Crawford became 39-0. He has that equalizer, which is that big, heavy, one-shot knockout power. And the one thing is, Terence Crawford will switch stances, which is why I touched on that open workout. He switches between southpaw and orthodox, orthodox and southpaw. Errol Spence will do that as well, but it's very selective. He doesn't do it all the time. And with Terence Bud Crawford, he'll constantly be changing his stance. He'll change his stance backing up, which on one hand is going to make it a little bit more confusing for Errol Spence, but judging off what we've seen in the open workouts, they're tailor-made and really focused on him switching his stances from southpaw to orthodox, expecting the power from the back left hand in southpaw or the straight right hand if it comes in the orthodox stance. I think Errol Spence is going to have an advantage in the 50-50 position. That's where he does his best work. Shoulder to shoulder, bumping off, shoulder rolling, uppercut, hook, cross, rip to the body, bang, 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 playing with the hands of the opponent. But you can't stay in the 50-50 position for too long against Crawford because of the power and the awkward angles that he can generate and the power that comes at awkward angles, which can make it harder to see for a fighter who's more technical, cerebral, and by the book technical based like, or by the book technique based like The Truth and Errol Spence. I think Errol Spence is the better fighter. I know you're going to say 28-0 versus 39-0, but when it comes to the sweet science, when it comes to boxing, I think the better boxer is Errol Spence, but the bigger power, which can kind of equalize the playing field by taking away some of that technique, is going to be Terence Bud Crawford, which is why I feel like this is a 50-50 fight. I'm going to say this, and maybe some of you will disagree with me, but I see a lot of similarities between Terence Crawford and Deontay Wilder. I would say that Crawford is a little bit more technical than Wilder. I'm going to give the devil his due. Like, he's good at setting up with the jab. He's good at touch, and ripping with the power shots. He's good off the back foot. He has better footwork, but at the same time, he can kind of get away with less technical shots and less technique in his fights because of the power that he has, and that's what Deontay Wilder is. Wilder isn't going to win a point-based style of fight. Wilder isn't going to win, round after round and be picking you apart, but if you make one mistake, he'll catch you on the chin and knock you out. That's why I think the game plan of Errol is so heavily based off the stance changing, the backing up, the controlling the range, the usage of the jab, the ripping to the body, because he knows that he has to be dialed in from the minute the fight starts in round 1 until the end of the 12 rounds, or until he finishes Terence Bud Crawford, or if he gets finished by Crawford as well. Because one mistake, one slip up, you leave one opening for a guy like Crawford, he'll catch you on the chin and knock you out. He's got more experience in professional boxing than Errol Spence Jr., but Terence Crawford is, I believe, is it Errol Spence who's moving up in weight, or Crawford? Let me see. And it looks as if Spence is moving up. Yeah, Spence is moving up in weight to take on Crawford. If I'm wrong, forgive me, but that's what it looks like. Errol Spence will take on Crawford for the undisputed welterweight championship. Yeah, so I think when it comes down to it, Errol Spence just has to be dialed in. He has to be technical. He has to be focused from the beginning of the fight until the end. And if you make one mistake, then you get caught by Terence Crawford. But I think if anybody can stay within themselves, if anybody can be technical, if anybody can control the range, if anybody's going to fight behind the jab, if anybody's going to be looking to tie up with the opponent but being off on the correct angles and being defensively responsible, that's going to be Errol Spence Jr. And the discipline of Errol the Truth Spence Jr. is what I believe is going to win him this fight. He has to be dialed in. He has to be technical. He has to stick to a game plan, and I think if anybody can do that, like we've already mentioned, it's going to be Spence. And I think Crawford's more reliant to get wild. I think Crawford's more willing to get into that firefight and leave himself open for counters, and it might even lead up to a Spence Jr. TKO over Crawford, but I don't think so. I think that he'll be able to survive, stay away from the big power shots of Crawford, which is a big ask because he is undefeated and he does catch almost everybody that he fights. But at the same time, I think that Terence Bud Crawford is going to be swinging at air for the majority of this fight, and Spence is going to be sticking behind that jab, touch, rip to the body, 1-1, bang, bang, bang. He's going to be following up, switching his stances, controlling the distance with the lead hand, and being able to pick apart Terence Crawford and stay defensively responsible for the entire 12 rounds of this fight. I could see a late TKO for Errol Spence Jr., but I think we're going to go to the scorecards, honestly. The more I think about it, I think it does make it the distance. So I'm going to go with Errol the Truth Spence Jr. to defeat Terence Bud Crawford via a unanimous decision. And that's going to be my pick for the fight. Let me know what you guys believe is going to happen in the comment section below. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and smash that notification bell with a big overhand right. I'm your host, Double M, and I'm out.